Hello everyone, my name is Martin and I run this YouTube channel called Taitset. Here we are at a big, very well-known milestone on any YouTube channel, 62,852 subscribers. The last Q&As I did were at 20,000 and 40,000, and of course I'm sure you can all work out how that mathematically results in this one being 62,852. So as is traditional, I have put a call out for questions here, and in this video I will be answering them. Thank you very much to everybody who sent in questions. As always, there are far more questions came in than I will be able to answer. I will try and get through as many as I can, but as time goes on there are more and more of you, but still the same number of me. So I do have to pick and choose a bit, and I've tried to consolidate some groups of questions that sort of have the same answers to them. I will say there was a lot of really good questions this time, and because of the sheer number of them, I did have to cut some genuinely good questions out, so I'm sorry to anyone whose question doesn't make it in. Just quickly, before we get started, as I answer your questions, we're going to be riding a train from Sunbury in the far northwestern corner of the network, down through the metro tunnel under the city, all the way out to East Pakenham in the far southeast. I'm only going to be talking, answering your questions for about an hour and 45 minutes, but the footage does continue for 15 odd minutes after that, all the way through to East Pakenham if you want to watch the whole thing. But let's get started, and yeah, here we go. So first question is, how are you going this year? Thank you very much for asking. Yeah, I'm going pretty well. Just been on a lovely winter camping trip in the Grampians, and overall I'm pretty good, thank you. All right, what has been my favorite meal I've done on one of my line videos? So I'm going to interpret this as a meal that I had for the purposes of the video rather than just something that I ate along the way, because there's obviously been a few times where I've incorporated food into the actual shot. I know everyone's a big fan of the donut that I bought at Gowrie, but I think there's been a few instances of fish and chips. I think I've got to go with the Footscray jam donuts though. The Footscray jam donuts are absolutely excellent, and I always try and get them whenever I go through there. What is my favourite railway associated pub? I had to think for a bit about this one because I'm sort of at a stage where I'm not regularly going to pubs at the moment, but when I was, a lot of the pubs I liked were more like tramway associated pubs, I'd say. However, if I had to pick a railway associated pub, I was fairly recently in Castlemaine and went to the Railway Hotel just across the road from Castlemaine station there, and that's a very nice little pub and also has views of up towards the Victorian Goldfields Railway there, so that's a pretty good one. What train network would you most like to ride that you haven't? It's a very good question. I'm quite interested in Buenos Aires. I think that's a really interesting system that I don't know very much about, but every time I sort of look into it, it looks really fascinating. I'd also say I've been watching some of Driver 667's cab ride videos from Sri Lanka that he's been uploading, and that looks like an absolutely fascinating railway system. So if I can ever manage to get myself there, that would be cool. Would you rather eat 6 individual Adelaide 3000 class or go to France? I mean, look, so far in my life, I've been to France twice, and I think I'm still at 0 3000 classes that I've eaten. So I think it is just going to be going to France, though. At this stage, I mean, look, the 3000 classes are a lot closer, so that would be easier, sort of logistically. What is my favourite yellow line on any platform at any station? This one at Yarraville's pretty good. Look at the way it's sort of, contrasts with the old yellow line and the tactile things that are supposed to be there. Pretty typical sort of situation that we see a lot around Melbourne. And the curve gives it a bit of interest there too. Did I track my hours for the Lilydale video? And if so, how many hours of my life were used to create this hour of top tier cinema? Thank you very much. No, I didn't track my hours, and it would be very interesting to do that. I'm not quite sure how I would, because there's a lot of I think it would sort of add to the process a fair bit if I was constantly having to start and stop a timer, and obviously it's a very long period to do it over, but it would be, I should try and work out how to do an estimate of it because it would be interesting, but let's just say lots. It's definitely lots. If Transport Victoria asked me to pick a mascot for them, what would I choose? The catch is I would need to wear the mascot costume for a day. I think a suitable mascot costume for Transport Victoria would be one of those orange buses replacing trains signs. So I'd probably just have that with like a hole for a face in the middle. I think that would really personify what Transport Victoria's sort of core attitude towards public transport is at the moment. It's looking like Labor might lose the next election in Victoria. How do I think this will impact future rail and public transport projects in the state? So first of all, I'll say I don't think it's a given that Labor will lose the next election. It's definitely a possibility, but from what I can see of the current polling, it's actually still bouncing around quite a bit. Labor's certainly taken some popularity hit in Victoria, but I think given the utter dysfunction of the Liberal National Coalition, my personal guess at this stage, still several months out, would be that a Labor win is still quite likely. And in terms of what it would mean for transport, I think if Labor loses, we'd be very likely to see some current transport projects not go ahead. I tried to look up what state Liberal Party policy is on transport at the moment, and there's basically hardly anything on their website. They did say that they would pause construction on the SRL, whatever that means. And then obviously there's the whole situation with One Nation surging in numbers. So it's possible we could end up with some sort of chaotic conservative coalition of like the remains of the Victorian coalition and One Nation, and that would be just bad for a ton of reasons. I think it would probably be bad for transport, but I'd be much more concerned about how bad it would be for a lot of other social issues and what it would mean for minority groups and human rights and workers' rights and all that sort of thing. So, and look, I'm not a massive Labor fanboy. I broadly agree with a lot of their stuff, but as you all probably know, I've been quite critical of many aspects of the big build and of the possible options being sort of Labor or the traditional coalition, or perhaps a more conservative coalition. I would still by far prefer to see Labor in power in Victoria. So that would be my hope. I would say for anyone wanting to look for some good like Australian political commentary, you should have a look at The Sloan Zone. He's a really good commentator here on YouTube who I think is very direct to the point and covers a lot of this sort of thing, looking into polling and what it could actually mean and a bunch of other fun stuff as well. So yeah, check him out. What would I like to see added to the network? Look, I mean, there's a lot of obvious stuff like the Doncaster line or the Rowville line, that kind of area. The SRL is obviously going to reduce the need for that sort of thing, but I'd probably personally argue that Doncaster is a busy enough place that you could have both. Do I have a favourite level crossing / pedestrian crossing soundscape? Which crossing is it? I don't. I do like this question, but I've only sort of fairly recently come into like an awareness of like different level crossing sounds and types of bells and things, which I know is a really big thing for some people. So for people who do have a specific favourite one, let us know, because that's fun. I certainly do like notice when I hear Westinghouse bells anywhere now, and I really hate the sort of most common type of electronic pedestrian bell, gate bell. I think that's a horrible sound. But yeah, I don't think I have one favourite at the moment. What is the strangest, almost dangerous thing I've done to get a photo of or video of a particular train? Well, I think I'm going to go with strangest, and it's got to be the opening shot in my Wonderbine video from a couple of years ago. If you haven't seen that, there'll be a link to it down the bottom, and I will put a pinned comment with links to all the things I mentioned in this video. So yeah, definitely the opening shot of the Wonderbine video was the strangest shot I've done of a train, I believe. If I had to move away from Melbourne, where would I move to? I don't know. It's not something I've ever thought about in great detail, but I actually really like Adelaide. I think I'd be quite happy living in Adelaide. Sydney, maybe. It's probably, I like going to Sydney. I'm not sure if I'd actually want to live there, but otherwise, yeah, Adelaide, or potentially maybe somewhere in New Zealand. I really like Wellington. I'd be very happy to live there. Would I move to an inner suburb if given the choice? I currently live a long way out on the Hurstbridge line, and not an ideal location for a transit-loving person. Yeah, I'd say that's broadly correct, but I'm sort of quite established out here in other aspects of my life, and I'm sort of not really a believer in that I guess, very like American approach to urbanism, where you can only have good urbanism in like a dense city center. I do think you can have good urbanism in certain types of suburbs and in small rural towns and things like that. There's a lot of Victorian rural towns which are still served by trains and are still very walkable, and even though I do live quite a long way from the city, I've always made sure to pick places where I can walk to a station, ideally be able to walk to shops and things as well. At the moment where I'm living, I can walk to most things, so it's more about, I think, the personal choices that you make. Like, I would never agree to get a job somewhere that I could only drive to, for instance. So yeah, being closer to the inner city certainly makes things easier, but if it's a big priority for you, I think you can live a pretty transit-oriented lifestyle further out in the suburbs. With my YouTube creator hat on, when is a video becoming too long? Is there a tipping point? I think my personal experience has been that there isn't one, because my longer videos are almost exclusively my most popular ones. Like the Lilydale video has been one of my best performing videos in recent times, and all of the other videos in that series are ones that have had a lot of ongoing traffic, long after they've been released. So it seems like for my audience and for the style that I'm doing, people are happy to watch very long videos, but it's definitely not the case for other people. There's definitely a lot of people who struggle to maintain attention and over a long video. So it's probably a different answer for different people, but yeah, the feedback that I constantly get is that people seem to be happy for my videos to be infinitely long. Is there anywhere in the world I would go specifically for rail reasons? I mean, yeah, I've already gone lots of places in the world specifically for rail reasons. I've made, I guess, 2 dedicated New Zealand trips just for rail. I go to Sydney at least once a year for rail stuff. I'd say there's also like holidays I've been on overseas and things which are not primarily rail trips, but seeing certain transport things definitely directed where that was going to happen. So yeah, there are plenty of places I would go just for rail. Do I think a beeline style service could work in Melbourne? So I know hardly anything about the beeline. The only thing I know about it is Shareth's video about it, Building Beautifully. But I gather it's just a pretty good BRT bus, and yeah, there's probably lots of places we could have that in Melbourne, particularly as like an interim to maybe better high capacity options further down the track. Like at the moment, one of the big criticisms that a lot of people have of the SRL is that it's being put into a place that currently has very, very poor transport, and getting something like a good BRT service running along the route of the SRL right now would be a great way to start encouraging people to use that route and start living along it in preparation for the SRL and being able to use that in the future. What's my favourite V-Line station? What do I think of Maryborough Station? Yes, Maryborough is lovely. I really like both Ballarat and Geelong. I really like, with the train shed over the platform. I really like platform 3, is it at Geelong, or is it platform 1? The one furthest from the main building, where it's sort of got the shed over the side of it with the advertising boards and stuff, and both those stations have got the nice wooden footbridge in the middle. Will I ever make a video about trains in other states, such as New South Wales or Queensland? I mean, obviously I do make quite a lot of videos about New South Wales relative to how often I can get there, and that's definitely going to be an ongoing thing. Queensland, definitely not against making videos in Queensland, it's just not somewhere that I go very often. I would definitely like to do something with something about Brisbane, but the logistics of doing that right now a bit tricky. I know that lots of people are happy making videos of places they haven't spent time in or haven't gone to specifically for the video, but that's not really how I function. It's a big part of my approach to making videos is that I do have to actually personally go to the places that I make videos about. So Brisbane's very likely to happen at some point, but it's not on my immediate list to do. But yeah, there'll definitely be some more New South Wales content this year and going forward. Do I have a favourite station anywhere? Yeah, I think it's Hawkesburn. I mean, I really like all of those like 1910s, 1920s electrification era multi-platform brick stations. As you would have noticed in the Lilydale video, I banged on for ages about how I like Glenferrie and Auburn. But yeah, all the math stations. I just really like Hawkesburn because it's just a really nice station. It's also pretty quiet, and it's got it's just lovely. I think that's one of my favourites. Am I aware of the website / game Trainly? Trainly. I wasn't until you made this comment, and I clicked on it, and I had a quick go of it, and yeah, that was kind of fun. I just wish it would generate more. It seems to only do one a day. It'd be cool if it like generated them, so you could do multiples at a time. But it would probably be easy to kind of get addicted to it then too, so maybe it's for the best. But yeah, that seems kind of fun. Which Melbourne lines have the best view from the train? I think I've said it before, but I really like the view departing Heidelberg on the down, where you can see across the valley over towards Doncaster and Box Hill. I guess there's a few different lines now that have kind of good views from Skyrail sections, but I sort of like that Heidelberg one because it's a bit more traditional rather than the rally being raised up specifically giving you a good view. In my city loop video, I mentioned if it wasn't for Jolimont Yard, the loop would have been designed differently and may have been more practical today. Do I have any thoughts on how that would have been done? I think it's a very broad question that would take a long time to really dig into. But I guess for those who are familiar with the proposed city loop reconfiguration, where you basically turn it into 2 double track lines, I guess, rather than 4 independent tunnels, and you have some lines running across the top of the city through Melbourne Central, avoiding Flinders Street and Southern Cross completely. I guess it probably would have been something like that, but it also might have been, there were earlier proposals that had an underground line more on the alignment of what the Metro Tunnel is now. So it might have been that the whole thing was quite different. You mentioned here Sydney City Circle, and yes, I do think that is a better model, but it works specifically very well for Sydney's geography because it's got that shape, and then there's the harbour north of it. So yeah, I don't have a really good answer for that, but I just think they probably would have explored other options which could have resulted in any number of different solutions, I think. Opinions on the current designs of the SRL interchanges. SRL Cheltenham at the minimum is questionable. Yeah, I hadn't really looked at this until I saw your comment here, and yeah, so there's a few things about the interchange at Cheltenham, and the first thing is that it's not with Cheltenham, the station. So it connects at Southland. So Southland is in the suburb of Cheltenham, but there's also a station called Cheltenham on the Frankston line, which is the next one down. And the fact that they're calling it SRL Cheltenham, but it doesn't connect to the current station called Cheltenham, it connects to Southland, is a problem that they're going to have to solve. So I would imagine that at some point that station is going to get renamed SRL Southland, which is fine, but like, why didn't they do that in the first place? If it stays being called SRL Cheltenham and it doesn't connect with Cheltenham Station, that will be extremely stupid. And more directly on what you're saying there about the nature of the interchange, it looks like it's going to be quite a big vertical distance between the SRL platforms and the current Frankston line platform at Southland, and also a big horizontal distance. And it looks like the reason they've chosen the site that they have is because they can like dig up and ruin a park to build it there instead of like the shopping centre car park. Probably not a great reason for where they've located it, and definitely not a good location going forward. However, there is one other thing about where it's positioned, is it looks like it might be positioned so that it could be easily continued on to Sandringham, because that's pretty much in a straight line from there. So maybe that's something they're considering as well. Do I plan to do any more accident videos in the future? Well, I won't not do it, but it's not sort of a big thing I want to do. My sort of criteria for doing accident videos is very narrow. The first thing is that they have to have an interesting story. So the reason why I made the Broadmeadows runaway video is because it has an interesting story. That's the absolute number one reason. And the vast majority of accidents don't have interesting stories. Like most accidents, like level crossing accidents, don't have interesting stories. It's like the truck didn't stop and the train hit the truck and then there was a big mess. So, and the other thing is that I don't really want to do like recent accidents where there's been deaths or serious injuries. So that combination of thing rules out most accidents. And like the only real reason I made the one about the Clifton Hill derailment was because of like the media response to it and how I thought that wasn't very good, and that was kind of my main story on it. Yeah, so I'm always open to doing these sorts of things, but it's not going to be like a major category of videos that I want to do. What do I think of Auckland's AM class EMUs or New Zealand's multiple unit trains in general? Look, it's been 10, 11 years since I've been on an AM class. They seemed absolutely fine. I think they're like pretty boring, and I don't think they're particularly attractive, but I'm sure as a train getting the job done, they're perfectly good and probably a very good decision for Auckland. New Zealand's multiple units in general, I will say the Matangis down in Wellington, I think are much cooler. I really like them. What's my preferred Comeng set to travel on, EDI or Alstom? Definitely the EDI ones. I much prefer what they look like inside with the yellow poles and that stuff, and they don't have that annoying MA sound that the Alstom sets have. What do I think of transit-oriented development plans in Melbourne and Sydney? Yeah, generally supportive of it. It's not something I have like really strong opinions about, but I think it is very important that if our city is going to continue to grow in population, that's how we have to do it. We need to build these population centres around transit hubs. And I'd also add to that we need to do it in such a way that the people who live there can do so without owning a car, which means we need to provide excellent public transport for them at all times. That means not shutting down railways for weeks at a time for track work, which is what we currently do. So I think as part of having these like TOD developments, we need to have an attitude shift in that day-to-day transport is an essential service and needs to be treated as such. How's my day going? It's going pretty well, thank you. It's really cold, but apart from that, it is absolutely fine. What are my opinions on the XT2s? Yeah, look, I'm not someone that gets super excited by like modern EMUs, but I think of all the possible options, this was a good one that we've taken, and they seem to be very well customized to Melbourne's operating environment, and I think they will do a very good job, and I hope we get more of them and start replacing some X-Trap ones. That would be cool. How many level crossing bells could you eat in 45 minutes? I think my current record's 0. Yeah, I think it's 0. If Melbourne's system could have one thing from Sydney's system and it would be available immediately, what would it be? I would say 15-minute off-peak frequencies as the default rather than 20. It's a relatively small change that makes a really big difference to usability. How do I feel about loco hold versus DMUs on the regional network? Yeah, I mean, obviously I've mentioned this in a few videos before. I think DMUs are kind of like more convenient for the operator, but they're not definitively better for passengers, and I do think it's a bit misleading the way they kind of get sold as being like that. I think for our long distance lines, the benefits of DMU are pretty low, and you get a lot of those benefits from just having a cab car at the other end of a loco hauled train, and then you end up with much quieter trains and also potentially much more adaptable to being different lengths. However, we're probably a bit far gone on that, and the sort of state government / V-line obsession with velocities is very entrenched now, and we're probably not going away from it. So what I would say is we must have a proper long distance fit out for velocities on the longer lines. It's really, really essential, and it's absurd that we don't have that anywhere other than Albury. And even the Albury ones, I'd say, is kind of a light long distance fit out. It's not what I would describe as a proper long distance fit out. What is my favourite metropolitan train network that isn't Melbourne's? Wellington. Have I ever driven a rail vehicle by myself? I've not driven a full-size rail vehicle. I have driven a lot of model trains, and I have driven a few 5-inch gauge trains, and I have once been allowed to drive a 7.25-inch gauge train with a couple of passengers on it, which was extremely fun, and thank you very much to the people who let me do that, if you are listening. But no, I have not driven a actual full-size train. If I could steal any rolling stock from another network and have it run in Victoria, what would I choose? I would obviously choose a VSET from New South Wales, and I would choose it like 40 years ago and electrify all our sort of interurban lines and run VSETs on them for the last 40 years. So basically doing what New South Wales did. And yeah, that would have been really cool. Have I ever considered becoming a tram or train driver? Not beyond, I guess, kind of a little bit of fantasy, but I would absolutely love to do either one of those jobs. It's more that I'm just not someone who actually wants to have a full-time job at all. So that sort of overrides any excitement I would feel about being a tram or train driver specifically. The other thing I would say is that this YouTube channel only exists because I don't have a full-time job. So if I was to become a tram or train driver, that would be definitely the end of these videos. So that's the other thing to consider, I suppose. What's a fiction or non-fiction book, TV show, or film I've watched and enjoyed in the past year or so? So I'm a very slow reader, not because my actual reading is slow, but because I get distracted really easily and read like half a chapter and then forget about my book for like a month. But I've been reading the first book of the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson, and very much enjoying it. I'm actually on to part 2 of book 1. I didn't realize book 1 was in 2 parts until I got to the end of it and realized it was only half a book. And anyway, I'm now on book 1, part 2. And I quite enjoy, I've always sort of liked reading fantasy stuff, and it's been quite enjoyable. What is my favourite type of Melbourne electric train of all time? I think it's a bit hard to have a favourite of all time because they sort of all filled very different roles in different times. So, like, I obviously love the Taits and the Swing Doors, but would I think they're the best train to run on the network right now? Probably not. But I guess as kind of the average best of all time, I think I would say the Comenge. I know they're not perfect, but I think they're a lovely train and I always enjoy travelling on them. And they sort of interest me in a way that none of the newer trains really do. So yeah, let's go with Comenge. Congratulations on reaching this oft sought after and auspicious milestone. Yes, thank you, Matt. If I was offered another HO scale unpowered Tate car, would I choose a D car, an arch roof car, or 201 BT? Excellent question. Love this one. I would, of course, attempt to choose all 3 of them, but I think I'd really like a D car, actually. I'd really like a D car to be able to run a 2-car set. That would be fun. So don't particularly like the odds of Ozvision actually offering that at this point, so I might have to think of a way of kit bashing one or something, but that would be really cool. Congratulations, and here is to 131,704. Thank you. Yes, you've got the maths worked out there. What is my worst day out photographing? Do I have any stories of outings that didn't go as planned? That is a great question. I'm sort of struggling to think of any that have been a complete disaster, but definitely had a lot of just like generally disappointing days where like I went out to see a train and it just didn't show up, and then it was raining and I went home again. But that's not a very interesting story, I guess. I did have one time in New South Wales trying to get up into the Blue Mountains. I think we had some very specific plan to photograph something, and just as we got to the base of the Blue Mountains at Emu Plains, our train got held because the Bathurst bullet ahead of us had broken down, and we ended up sitting there for a while, then going back to Emu Plains, and then it seemed like nothing was going to run for the next few hours, so we went back to the city, and then it was pouring with rain. It was a really, really wet day, and we ended up having to scuttle our plans, but then we ended up going up to Cowan for some reason in the afternoon, and having sort of scuttled our plans for rail photography, did a walk from Cowan down to Hawkesbury River, which is an incredible walk, and sort of discovered this really cool part of New South Wales that I wouldn't have discovered if that hadn't happened. So that was cool. Do I have a favourite AFL team? I don't. I'm not much of a sports person. But my default option at the moment would be the Sydney Swans, just because I have an extended family member who plays for them. So that's the one for me right now. Just wondering what sorts of hobbies and interests I have outside the rail and public transport world. Yeah, look, as I've mentioned before, I really like camping and bushwalking, and I'm very passionate about nature conservation and ecology. And I do, I guess, kind of incorporate that with my rail interest a lot with the sorts of places I like to go. I also have sort of a on-again, off-again relationship with playing music. I come from a very musical family. I'm by far the least musical person in my family, but I do play guitar and bass, and I've recently been playing with a few people for the first time in a while because I haven't been able to play much since having kids. So yeah, just been kind of recently getting back into playing guitar again, and that's been kind of fun. Just wondering whether you yet make sufficient from your brilliant YouTube work to quit ordinary employment. So the short answer is yes. I quit my job back in the end of 2023, and at the time I still had some other sort of freelance stuff I was doing, but I've sort of slowly got rid of that, and now YouTube is my entire income. So in some ways I could say I do YouTube full time, but there's a few important caveats to that so as to not give the wrong impression, and that is that I never had a full-time job in the first place. I've never worked full-time, and I only worked 3 days a week when I had a normal job. So that's the income that I had to replace. I didn't have to replace a full-time income to go full-time. So the stakes were kind of a lot lower for me. And while I do now make enough money from YouTube to cover my daily living expenses, I would still make more if I just had a minimum wage full-time job. So I find, obviously, I spend a lot of time parenting, and for me, doing parenting and working 3 days a week was close to maximum capacity for me. And then doing YouTube on top of that, which I obviously did for a few years while I was sort of building up towards it, that was very unsustainable. It was very, very hard to do YouTube as well as having a job as well as parenting. And it meant that I was working on YouTube at very non-ideal times, really overworking myself a lot, which was kind of what I had to do to get to the threshold of being able to quit my job, which was not really the goal at the time, but then I wanted to quit my job for other reasons, so I decided to take the leap. And I basically told myself I would give it maybe a year and see if I could make YouTube earn enough that I didn't have to get another job. And that was a success, but I'd say the main reason that was a success was that I had such a good uptake on Patreon. So the income from YouTube itself is always pretty unpredictable and doesn't necessarily grow that much as the channel grows, whereas as I've had more and more people join Patreon, that is something that has grown to provide that sort of support. So the first year was taking a big risk and relying a lot more on my partner's income. But at the end of that year, if I hadn't got as many people signing up to Patreon as I did, I would have had to go and get another job and drop YouTube back to being just a much, much more casual thing. So for all those of you who have signed up to the Patreon, thank you so much. You are the reason why I'm still here making these videos. And that's what I mean when I say Patreon is what makes this channel sustainable, is that I would have had to stop making videos regularly and put that time and energy back into having a job again, because I wouldn't have had a choice. So Patreon has been absolutely wonderful for me, and it's been really good sort of growing that community of people there as well. So yeah, thanks guys, and I'm really glad that everyone still seems to be enjoying the videos. Do I think Victoria's railways would look any different today if privatisation hadn't happened? I think it's a little bit hard to look at Victoria as a sort of single case study of privatisation, because the build-up through the 80s, or even 70s, 80s and 90s, to the end of the 90s when we privatised, was a time of pretty big neglect from the government, particularly in the 90s. So we're sort of given this example of, and this may have been intentional to make privatisation ultimately look better, but we basically had this big deterioration of everything being pretty crap, and then privatisation came in, and while there's been lots of stuff that's imperfect about it, it did help the network build back into what it is now, which is a pretty respectable system compared to what it was in the 90s. So I think it's really hard to say here, because we don't really know if it had stayed public, if that neglect would have continued or not. So I think the ideal world answer is it should have stayed public but been looked after properly, like has happened in New South Wales. But who knows if that's what would have happened. So I think it's very hard to give a definitive answer. There's a couple of questions here asking what is the best or favourite picture I've ever taken. I definitely don't have a single favourite or even a handful of favourites, because I've been doing this for a pretty long time, and I'd like to think I take quite a few good ones. So I've probably got hundreds of favourites that I've taken over the years. It is very hard for me to pick any one photo to show as an example, but I'm just going to throw this one up because I do really like this picture. This is the Weisner Viaduct in Switzerland near Davos-Weisen station. It's just up the Landwasser River from the much more well-known Landwasser Viaduct that many people will probably be familiar with. I love this photo because it was very unplanned. I was actually just walking to the more well-known viaduct, and it's also not how I would have planned to do it. It sort of breaks a lot of rules of correct lighting and things like that, but it just happened to work with what was going on there on that day, and I really love this shot. I can definitely still critique some things about it, and I do plan on hopefully this year or fairly soon making a more in-depth video about railway photography, and I will probably critique this photo in that, but overall, yeah, rather pleased with this one. So a couple of questions here about my book collection. How large is it? And can you please get a spread of my favorite books? Yeah, I would say it's not massive, but it is sort of surrounding my office on all sides. So I'm going to throw up a few. I don't know I can do a full spread because that will require pulling them off the shelf and I'll be here all day, but I will chuck up a few pictures of some of my favorites here. There's a bunch of questions here about the CRL, the City Rail Link in Auckland opening probably later this year, and am I interested in it and would I go see it? I am very interested in it. I have been paying quite a bit of attention to it. I think one of the things that interests me the most about it is that while a lot of comparisons will definitely be drawn with the Metro Tunnel and Brisbane's Cross River Rail, stuff like that, it's like technologically it's actually a lot more similar to our City Loop in the 80s. It looks really interesting and I certainly hope I'll be able to go and see it. I don't know when that will happen, but I would like to work it into my next New Zealand trip, certainly. So I've got a few different questions here about sort of what my favourite line is, or what I would recommend as if you had time to visit one line, what would it be? And it's pretty hard for me to not say the Hurstbridge line. I just think the Hurstbridge line is really interesting, especially beyond Greensborough. I'd say if you had the time, go out to Hurstbridge, get a coffee or something, and then like walk back to Wattle Glen or Diamond Creek and sort of experience that part of the Diamond Creek Trail as well. Just that whole rural part of the line at the end with the passive level crossings, and you've got the wooden trestle bridge at Eltham. I think it's fascinating. I'd also say the end of the Belgrave line is fantastic. That's really interesting. And another one where you can get off and walk back because there's the parallel bike track on the old narrow gauge alignment there. Yeah, and there's also part of one of those questions is how could you work it in for a non-transport enthusiast? And that's a really good question because obviously a lot of us do travel with people who might not be as fascinated by this stuff as we are. I would say, I mean, if you're in Melbourne in summer or when it's fairly warm, there's lots of places you can catch a train and then walk to a beach. Like a lot of the Frankston line stations, some of the Sandringham line stations, and also some of the Williamstown and Altona line stations are all got good walks to beaches. Another good one is go to Royal Park, catch a train out to Royal Park and Upfield line, go visit the zoo. The zoo's great. And then you can go and have a look at the off-street trackage of the Route 58 tram going through Royal Park and then go back to the city on the tram. That's a good one. So there's a few questions here about the free travel period that we had just recently. We had 2 months of free travel, extensively relating to the oil crisis. Look, I'm one of those people that kind of thinks free travel is not the most important thing we could do. There's just so many other things that would improve the accessibility of the network for people, running better off-peak frequencies, stuff like that. And I know there are instances where Melbourne's public transport isn't great value for money, such as very short trips, but most of the time, if you're like commuting reasonably long distances, it is very cost effective. It's not a big expense. The majority of times that I go to the city or something, I definitely spend more money on like lunch or coffee than I do on the train. It's pretty cheap. And I think maybe people just forget how expensive driving a car is normally, because I sort of thought it was kind of a funny reaction to the oil crisis that they were saying, oh, let's make public transport cheaper so that people can save money as a cost of living thing. But it already saves money to use public transport. Like, obviously this made it even cheaper, but yeah, I mean, public transport's already a lot cheaper than driving for most trips. So I will say something I was maybe a little bit surprised by is that I did think it did kind of feel good not having to pay, not because of the money aspect, just because like the gates were all open, you just walk in and out of the platform whenever you feel like it. There was sort of a bit of a good feeling of like, this is our public infrastructure that we are allowed to use at any time kind of thing. And I think that's maybe something I didn't fully anticipate. That is kind of a feel-good part of freight travel, regardless of what the actual cost is. All right, a couple of questions here about if there was one small thing I could make to the network. One case here we have, if I was the Minister of Transport magically for a day, what would I do? I would make it so that buses that are supposed to connect with trains actually connect with them in the timetables. I know this might seem radical to a lot of Melbourne people, but that is what like feeder buses are supposed to do. And in Melbourne, we have a ton of places where the buses are just not timetabled to connect with the trains. So yeah, that's something that would make a massive difference. And obviously just generally taking buses more seriously would be great. But yeah, making bus and train timetables actually line up together in wherever that is possible, I think would make an enormous difference to our system. Sort of related to the previous collection of questions, there's another one here of, what's something that we should adopt from overseas or from other systems for our system. And I think partly just an elaboration of what I just said, that, actually having a really integrated timetable that works for the whole system, so that sort of connections are predictable wherever you can make them. And also just treating public transport with the seriousness that it deserves. And, we've sort of developed this culture in Melbourne where it's apparently okay to close major railway lines, including, for instance, the brand new metro tunnel, which they're closing for 5 days next week. We've developed this culture where it's okay to do that, and it's okay to have these lines closed on weekdays for often very minor things, or very things that could absolutely be avoided with a little bit of thought. And I don't think that's okay for a city of our size. That's something that I think is incredibly important that we do here, is go back to the time of the trains need to keep running, we need to keep people moving, and you shouldn't be able to just close a suburban railway line on a weekday for minor reasons, or it should be basically very hard to do it at all, and it seems like it's very easy to do it at the moment. So I've got sort of a group of questions here, people asking, will I ever make videos in the same format as my suburban long line videos, but about V-line routes? So there's a few things to consider here. One is that at my current rate of making the suburban ones, that series is likely to be finished in the mid-2030s. Now, for all the people who keep asking when they can expect certain videos to be made, I want you to think about that really carefully when the mid-2030s is. That is roughly how long it's going to take at my current rate, because I'm also making all the other videos. So any decision about whether or not I would do this for other lines is a decade away. So I don't have an opinion on this really. But the other thing I would say is that the logistics of doing that style of video for country lines would be much, much harder. And I suspect the amount of interest from the audience would be a bit lower as well. That's not definite, but I just think there's more interest from people who live on these lines in these videos. So we'd be just talking about probably a lower amount of interest in a video that would be much harder to make. So it's extremely unlikely that I would make videos in that same format. It's not to say I wouldn't cover those lines in some other way, but it's very, very unlikely that I would do them like that. Out of the 4 narrow gauge lines, which one would be my favourite had they all still been fully open? I would have loved to see the Beach Forest line. I think the Beach Forest line would have been really cool. I have driven along that route, and it's a pretty amazing area. And yeah, unfortunately, I was very much not alive at the time that the Beach Forest line was open. But apart from Beach Forest, I'd say the best bits are the bits that are still open. So the whole Gembrook line and the super scenic end bit of the Walhalla line. So it is very lucky that we can still travel on as much of the former narrow gauge network as we can. What is, in my opinion, is the most scenic, pretty or interesting regular train line in Australia? Definitely the New South Wales Central Coast line between Woy Woy and Cowan, the Cowan Bank, and the bit along the Hawkesbury River and Mullet Creek. Absolutely sensational. How many transport-related photos have I taken throughout the years? So just having a quick look at this, I think it's about 85,000 since I started in 2002. Right, so there's a few questions here asking about what my next video will be in the long line series, including one question that's actually asking me what the next 3 lines will be. This is something that I talk about on Patreon in my updates, and it's something that I try to keep a bit of a mystery for the public, so I can't answer that here. If you want to know what line I'm working on next, it is on Patreon. I've got a whole video there explaining my process for deciding the next line and which ones are likely to come soon, and also the one that I'm working on right now. Keep in mind that, like I said just before, the time scale of making these, I don't really think much beyond the next one, because it's just a long time. So I certainly don't have the next 3 mapped out. I've maybe got a few thoughts about possibilities with it, but yeah, if you want to know what's happening with my long line videos, jump onto Patreon. And as I say, the more people I have on Patreon, the more sustainable this channel is, and the support from the people there is why I'm able to spend multiple plus years on this series. How long can it take to edit the biggest videos I make? So to give a bit of perspective, the Lilydale line video took 18 months for its full production, and probably about 2 months of that was editing at the end. So editing is not actually a big part of it. The biggest parts are writing script and physically going out, getting footage, learning stuff, double checking stuff, that all basically parts of building the script, which all builds up to recording it and then putting everything together. The actual editing stage is a relatively short time. It's a very labor-intensive time, but it is a relatively short part of it. How likely do I think the possibility of Puffing Billy restoring 3A is? I have absolutely no idea, but my strong suspicion would be that it might be easier to build a new NA from scratch rather than restoring 3A. But there are plenty of people who know a lot more about that than I do. With your coverage of the Metro Tunnel over the last couple of years, did you have a formal arrangement for behind-the-scenes coverage, and did you score any of that sweet, sweet big build corruption cash? I'm so glad you asked. Yeah, Jacinta Allen drops in every couple of weeks with a big bag of cash for me, and yeah, that's been great for the sustainability of the channel too. All of my staff now drive Lamborghinis. We sort of try and keep it on the low down, but that's how we're starting to roll around here at Taitset Industries Incorporated. Sorry, I probably should actually answer this question a bit more seriously. So no, I didn't have any formal arrangement with the state government or Big Build or the Metro Tunnel people. I was basically invited as a case-by-case basis to certain events. There was no money involved in either direction. Obviously, I make money from making the videos, but that money doesn't come from them. And there was never any attempt to control the narrative by then. I was always allowed to say anything I wanted. When the tunnel was still under construction, they sometimes wanted to check certain things in the footage to make sure that certain, OH&S policies and things were being followed in the footage, but they never asked me not to publish anything, and they never gave me any direction on what I should say or questioned anything. And the other thing I'd say is that I sort of have a lot of respect for this because I was critical of certain aspects of it at certain times, and they still invited me back. So I think it was a pretty good arrangement. The Metro Tunnel obviously had a policy of inviting social media people, including myself, to these things. There was a little bit of The Age tried to sort of stir up a little bit of controversy about it. I honestly think they were annoyed that YouTubers were getting invited to the tunnel and mainstream media wasn't, but really I don't think there's anything particularly mysterious about it. They obviously decided that it was a good policy to have to get that type of coverage, and it worked really well for people like me as well, and also for people like you who got to see a side of the project that you wouldn't have seen through the mainstream media. So yeah, and things are looking pretty good for maybe some similar situations with the SRL going forwards. Assuming Labor wins the next state election, that is. I suspect if Labor does not win the next state election, those kind of arrangements would probably be off the table. Do I think the Melbourne tram network needs modernisation to begin to look something closer to the modern tram network in Sydney? So I think there are certain things that we should definitely be doing / should have done ages ago, like more traffic light priority, more reserved running out of car lanes. We should probably be running like coupled sets like Sydney does on like 86, 96, 58, some of those other busy routes. So yeah, there's definitely parts of the Melbourne network that would benefit from more of that style of operation, but I also think that doesn't really take away from the value of the lesser used parts of the network as well. And I think we're actually really fortunate to have some of those lesser used tram lines that would never get built today because they're not like modern light rail, things like, the outer end of Route 70 or, whatever, those sorts of routes. We're very lucky to have them. They wouldn't get built today, and they do benefit people's lives every day. So, I don't think it has to be one or the other, but we're definitely pretty behind on taking some of our busier routes a bit more seriously. All All right, I've got a sort of a folder of questions here that are relating to a bit more to my YouTube process, which is really cool. I like hearing these sorts of questions. So let's have a look. What made me start randomly inserting fake ads for myself in my videos? In this case, the post commemorating my subscriber count. Yeah, I was very kind of the Metro Tunnel to replace that advertising board at Town Hall with a live subscriber count for my channel. That's going to be a permanent fixture, I'm told now. So yeah, if you're ever wondering how many subscribers I have, just head into Town Hall and you can see it there up on the screen. In all seriousness, I think I've always just kind of been a fan of that sort of like satirical advertising, satirical comedy advertising. I used to watch a lot of like The Chaser, and before that CNN. They always had fake ads, and they had like the fake news ticker down the bottom, which I obviously imitated in one of my Metro Tunnel videos. So yeah, I think I've always just enjoyed that kind of, I guess, taking the piss out of advertising generally, but also it's just a funny way to throw in a few Easter eggs into the videos. I do wonder if anybody spotted all of the fake billboards in the Lilydale video. I think there are 4, maybe more. There's at least 4. There might be more. Yeah, I think it's 4. How do I get such creative shots in your videos? So I'm not quite sure if this means like visually like good creative or like kind of outside the box funny creative, like this shot, but I'm going to assume it's the first one. And I mean, I've just spent a lot of time practicing doing this stuff. So, you know, I studied film in high school, and then I went on and studied photography at a tertiary level. And I've also just had 20 years of practicing with this stuff. And I've worked in camera stores, so I sort of know a fair bit about the hardware. But I've spent a lot of time. Particularly when I was in uni, I used to do a lot of. So I was lying. I didn't go to uni. I went to TAFE. When I was in TAFE, I did a lot of fine art photography and like landscape photography, that sort of thing. So I guess that's all translated into stuff I do for the channel. Most of the filming I do for the channel is definitely not like fine art level stuff, but it takes a lot of the lessons from that. But I'm definitely a bit more relaxed about the sorts of shots I use in the channel compared to if I was doing something for an art gallery, for instance. Which out of all my videos did I have the most fun making? I really enjoyed making the Adelaide video. I think that was, I'm not exactly sure why. I think it was just a bit different to everything else I've done. I sort of had to do a lot of reading for it and stuff, but also, you know, fortunately I had to go to Adelaide for something else, so I actually had the opportunity to go there, and I went specifically to the NRM and I went and got a bunch of shots that I specifically needed for it, so that was quite fun. I also did like a few things with the editing of that are a bit different. Like I did the chapter cards for each chapter, which I quite liked. So yeah, no, I really enjoyed that. But apart from that, I think I quite enjoy doing a lot of the interstate ones. I really liked that one I made about the going on the XPT. And then there's also one I've had quite a lot of fun with so far, which none of you have seen yet because it's not finished, but that's going to be another interstate focused one coming out later sometime in the future. Do I edit all by myself, or do I have like a couple of team of editors? No, it's just me. I know there are some channels not much larger than this that probably employ people to do editing, but no, I only just make enough money to pay myself, and I definitely don't make enough money to pay a second person at this point. The only other, I guess the closest thing I have to staff members are my brother Kian, who does all the sort of sound engineering and recording for me. So right now I'm sitting in his studio/bedroom recording this audio, but he does that on a voluntary basis. I'm also eating some corn chips that he's left on the desk here, and I can't say for sure if I'll reimburse him for that or not either. And then my mate Alexander Jamison, Melbourne Sparks on YouTube, also contributes quite a lot to the videos. You will have seen multiple times he's assisted in recreating things in miniature. We did the 1/24 scale E-Train for Lilydale video, and certainly somebody that I bounce a lot of ideas off as well, and is often with me on a lot of the travel and interstate trips as well. So I have people that help me out, and definitely I couldn't do it without, but at this point, everything, the vast majority of the process is myself, including all the editing. Are there any videos I've made that I'd like to redo with the benefit of improving skills? Yes. It's kind of the curse of YouTube. It's basically all of them. If I look at any video that's more than like a year old, I tend to cringe quite a lot about certain things that I did, especially like timing wise, editing wise, or certain phrases that I used in my writing. I think my writing's got a lot better because that's something I guess I didn't learn specifically, but I've sort of learned as I've written a lot of these scripts now. I mean, I think this is a kind of a thing that happens with any sort of creative process, is obviously you get better as you go along. So if you look back too far, you're going to spot things that aren't ideal. I also think like there are some videos where I start spotting errors with them, maybe even before they go public, but it's kind of too late without going back and redoing hours of something. So it's just a bit of an unfortunate thing of the format. Like with the Lilydale video, there's a few little things that I would have loved to have changed, but by the time I was aware of them, it would have set back the whole thing by another few days, and you sort of get to a point where you just have to call it and upload it. It is something you just sort of have to learn to live with, I think, making this type of content. How do I organize my media library? I frequently show photos taken in very precise locations that I took years or even decades ago in my videos. I am so glad you asked, because this is something I'm very proud of. I have this like very elaborate metadata tagging system for my photos, where all my photos as they come in, I go through Lightroom and do a bunch of stuff to them, but I also assign tags to them. It's sometimes called keywords. I think it's usually called tags. It's just a metadata field that just about any file can have. And then you can use programs like Adobe Bridge or some other programs to search them. So all my photos, and at some point I went back and did it all the way back to the start of time for my photos as well. All my photos are tagged with like the name of the location, the type of train, usually the like number of the lead car or locomotive, sometimes some other stuff, and I've got a whole bunch of like parameters written down for things that might not be clear of how they should be tagged. So I can search for I don't know, I need an example picture of a Comenge at Essendon. I can type in Comenge, Essendon, and all the pictures I have of a Comenge at Essendon will be right there in front of me. It doesn't always work. It does have 85,000 photos to search through, and it kind of has to index them. And once it's indexed them, it works quite well, but it seems to sort of occasionally lose that temporary information and gain it back again. So sometimes I have to just let it run for a while and think through the whole collection again, but broadly speaking, it works. And it was a lot of work doing it. It's not that hard doing it to new photos coming in. It was a lot of work going back and doing it. And luckily, I think I did that before I had kids. It probably would have never happened if I hadn't done that. But it is absolutely brilliant and very satisfying being able to search for those things. And I would recommend that if you are taking a lot of transport pictures and you're early on in your career of doing that, I would very much recommend coming up with some sort of system like that. And I do have a behind the scenes video on Patreon where I explain that system a little bit more and show some examples of me using it. How do I make the animated track diagram maps? It's pretty simple. I actually just draw them in Photoshop, and then if I've got anything that's moving, or if I've got the things that are changing, like the red arrows showing different directions and things, those are usually just a separate frame. And if I have something that's moving on it, like a train graphic, that's just a separate file. And in the editing software, I use DaVinci Resolve. I animate it using keyframes moving across the frame. So yeah, but as essentially the diagrams I draw in Photoshop, and they have multiple layers with all the different things that I need to show on them. What is the best footage that I have lost, whether that be from an accidentally formatted card or broken hard drive? This is another thing I'm quite proud of. I don't think I've ever lost anything really. There's been one or two times where I might have had one or two corrupted files a while ago, but I've never had like a catastrophic loss. I've still got pretty much everything. I did have a really, really big close call where on my first trip to Europe in 2012, it was a little bit harder technology-wise then to take a lot of pictures on an overseas trip, and I was backing up to a physical hard drive that I was carrying with me. It wasn't really practical to send stuff back via the internet at that time, and I couldn't really afford to just carry more cards or whatever. Anyway, that hard drive had a mechanical failure before I arrived back in Australia, and there was a few weeks where I was not sure if I had lost half of my pictures from Europe, which would have been something that would have haunted me to this day, because a lot of my favorite pictures were on that hard drive. And yeah, it would have been a disaster. But fortunately, I found some guy who charged me a ton of money to take it apart and put it back together again. And he saved the day. And those pictures are absolutely fine. And as I say, many shots that I absolutely love were on that hard drive. So it was a very close call, but it would be unlikely to happen again, because I'd probably have a better backup system in place today. And I should say, I do have, for my stuff that is at home, I do have a pretty elaborate backup system. Everything is in 3 places, and one of those is off-site. So if a meteorite crashes into my house or destroys my entire suburb, I won't lose any photos. How do I make those perfect side-on views of rolling stock, the ones I use in the various videos on my diagrams? There's a bunch of different ways I make them. I did make a quite long video on Patreon about this, showing all the different techniques, but so some of them are drawings. Some of them are just dead side-on pictures that I've manipulated in Photoshop to make into those shapes. The HCMT one is made from photos that I took. If you look at it, something that I don't think anyone's pointed out is I actually stuffed it up, and the pattern of the livery is wrong on all the intermediate cars, or lots of the intermediate cars. Something I need to get around to fixing. Then some of them are screenshots from OpenRails, which is the modern open source version of Microsoft Train Simulator. So the ones you mentioned from Eevee, those are OpenRails models built by Alexander Jamison, and those are just side-on views of those. And then there's a few different things. The one of the Taits that I made is actually my HO scale Tait cars literally just slapped on my scanner. So yeah, that's what that is. You are a pretty busy uni student studying engineering and having a blast making YouTube videos. Worried that when you go back to school, you won't be able to find time to make them. You know, I have a pretty busy adult life, so how do I find the time to make videos consistently? This is an excellent question, and kind of the big question. And like I said before, when I had a job and I was parenting, it was very hard to find time to make YouTube videos, and it was only really possible because I did all of those 3 things over a fairly short time, like maybe a year or 2, before ditching the least important of those 3 things, which was having a job. And so I think if you want to do YouTube as like a hobby, you've got to find a way of squeezing it in somewhere, and that's very likely going to be not ideal, and it's going to be hard. But also, if it's just a hobby, you can probably be a bit more relaxed about it, so maybe that doesn't matter. If you want to do it as a job, or you want to move towards maybe doing it as a job, I think the biggest thing I've found is you've sort of got to shift psychologically to treating it as a job. So you've sort of got to give yourself allocated hours that you work on it, whether that be 9 to 5 or whatever works for you. I sort of have tried to give myself allocated times where I'm not paying attention to what my kids are asking me. Don't worry, somebody else is. And that time is allocated for me to work. So yeah, you kind of do have to sort of treat it like a job like that. But yeah, it is a difficult thing to do, and all the best. Do you reckon there's a place for AI in creative spaces like YouTube, or no? No is basically my short answer. No, I'm pretty strongly opposed to AI generally, and specifically in creative spaces. I think it's pretty awful and has been pretty destructive so far. I think that's for a number of key reasons relating to creativity specifically. I think that content that uses AI to be created all ends up kind of looking the same and devoid of humanity, because that's sort of definitionally what it is. I also think there's a huge risk, particularly of people who are just starting out, if they're using AI for creative processes, they're going to miss out on actually learning those skills themselves and the development that comes with that. You could maybe argue, well, I don't need those skills because AI can do it for me. And I would argue that skills are often valuable in places you don't expect them to be valuable. And I think one of the best things you can do as a member of the human race is learn to do things creatively yourself. So, you should absolutely just avoid using it, is my opinion. And I also have much broader sort of ethical and philosophical concerns about AI, and I could bang on about this for a very long time, but I won't. But yeah, definitely not for me. If I was to pick exactly one train to preserve to the end of time, what would it be? The first Comeng set, 301M, 302M, in cup and saucer livery as delivered. Yep, that's it. That's all we need. Just get rid of the rest. Done. Do my children share my enthusiasm for trains, public transport? Not really, like not beyond the fact that most kids are interested in trains at least a bit. It's definitely like a bit of that thing of like, that's dad's thing. They're like, they like coming on the train and they like using public transport, which is great. And that's probably the main thing that I want, to be honest. But if it's a matter of like, oh, we're doing a detour because dad needs to see a train somewhere, they're usually not particularly impressed. But they do seem to enjoy watching my videos, and they definitely like driving my model trains. So that's good. How could you realistically get NSETs to be introduced back on the Warrnambool line? You would need to become Supreme Dictator of Victoria and use probably military force to convince the state government NV line that NSETs are actually great for long distance, or perhaps some modern version of an NSET. But yeah, if you run as Supreme Dictator of Victoria on the platform of more comfortable trains for the Warrnambool line, I'll absolutely support you. If you were to have 62,852 of one item, what would it be? I think I would get 62,852 $100 notes and then get whatever I wanted. Would you ever make the trip up to Darwin via only public transport, provided you can even afford it? I'm assuming when you say by public transport, we're talking about the GAN, which is kind of arguably not public transport, but I would be interested in doing it. But that last part is the key part. Yeah, I can't afford to go on the GAN, unfortunately. Are there any journeys on the Victorian Rail network that you remember the most, good or bad? Yeah, and it's hard to go past. The first ever mainline steam trip I did was in 2003 with SteamRail. It was a day trip to Witchyproof. A lot of people probably have heard of this trip because it was notable for being kind of a disaster, but kind of fun. It got enormously delayed. For those who don't know, Witchyproof is right up in the Mallee. It's a really, really long day trip, and there were multiple delays on the way there. We ended up leaving Witchyproof in the dark. We got to Bendigo after midnight. I believe it was the last passenger train to ever run via the Inglewood to Eaglehawk line, which closed not that long after. This was with double R class, by the way, R761 and 707. We left Bendigo at something like 1 a.m. and this was when the Bendigo line was still double track, and before there was quite so much close monitoring of what speed trains were doing and things like that, and we absolutely flew back along the main line to Melbourne in the dark. I was standing in the open doorway of the CW van pretty much the whole way. I'm not sure if this is my memory like over dramatizing it, but I feel like it was a full moon as well, and it was just really incredible experience. I remember going through Big Hill Tunnel and Elphinstone Tunnel in the van, filling up with smoke. Anyway, we got back to Spencer Street at a little bit after 3 a.m. and my dad came and picked me up and took me home. So yeah, that was cool. As a true Melburnian, do I in fact harbour a one-sided rivalry between Melbourne and Sydney? Yeah, absolutely. It's just because we're so much cooler than them. Like, we're better than them, and that must be pretty hard for them to deal with. So yeah, that's pretty much the reason. How do I go about researching for a video? That's something I think it's pretty hard to answer in a big way, but a lot of people seem to assume that all the information in my video is sort of like researched in some way. I'd say the main way I come about the things I include in my videos is by physically going to a place. So to use an example, like in the Lilydale video, that piece of double-headed rail at Glen Ferry, I meant that literally when I said I just noticed it. Like, I saw that. I think I actually stopped and like leant against the wall next to it and looked down and was like, oh, that's a double-headed piece of rail, which, you know, I just already knew what double-headed rail was. So it wasn't hard for me to work out that that was an interesting thing. And then later I looked up, you know, what dates that was in use in Victoria, and I found the website, which is linked to in the video at that point. So yeah, a lot of the stuff is quite heavily based on what I see out there, and then depending on what it is, might have to go down a research rabbit hole to get more information. What's the total storage size of my photo and video collection? I think it's currently getting towards 9 terabytes. That includes like all of my stuff. So that's also like non-rail photos and some other stuff, but like probably 80% of it is rail photos and video. 9 terabytes. And as I said earlier, it's in 3 places. So it's 3 9 terabytes. For what reasons are you camera shy? I would not say that I'm camera shy, but I understand what you mean. I don't normally show myself in the videos. It's a choice that I just made pretty early on that I didn't want to show my face. While this is not a particularly big channel compared to some out there on YouTube, I do have a very concentrated audience. Like, most of my audience lives in Melbourne, and most of them like doing the same things I like doing. So the odds of me running into people who are sort of fans, I guess, out in the world is very, very high. I know that I'm often in places where I'm surrounded by them, and I just don't really... I always love meeting people when it does happen, but I don't really... Me being famous is not a priority of this. So I do have a list of kind of like goals of this channel, and I think I put like a joke one on the screen in one of my Metro Tunnel videos. That is a real thing. It's just that's not the actual list. But my face becoming famous is not one of the goals. So it's just something that I don't particularly mind becoming fairly well known. I just don't want to get recognized everywhere I go, basically. But bit of a shout out to all those people who did work out who I was and came and said hi on the XT2 launch day. It was very nice to meet you all. Of all the freight rail operators in Victoria, which is the most interesting fleet? Well, it's definitely SSR, isn't it? Love all the ancient EMDs they are running. Can I drive a train? I think I've got a like reasonably good theoretical knowledge of how to drive a train, but as I mentioned earlier, I have never done so. And if I did, I would get arrested. So I can drive a train in Microsoft Train Simulator. Have I ever ridden the Hunter Line or explored stations around Newcastle, Maitland? I have not been on the Hunter Line. I've been to Newcastle back when the line ran all the way into town, probably about 2010, something like that, when they were still running like the 2-car K sets and that stuff. That was really cool. So glad I did that. I haven't been back since, but I would like to come up and explore the area more, yeah. I've got a few questions here about my model railway, which I occasionally show little snippets of. Yeah, it's pretty small. It's pretty... I guess relatively low effort for the moment because I don't own my house and it will have to get ripped up again at some point. It's about the 4th or 5th layout that I've built in this kind of nature. It's built just on the shelf above my computer. I have tried to build this one in a more modular way, designed so that the main station area could be lifted up and transported to a new house, but I've also said that about all the previous ones, and it's ended up being easier to dismantle it and start again from scratch. So I will show you, this is what the current track plan is. It's basically like a suburban terminus station with a little goods yard, and then it just runs out to kind of some random sidings, which are above my partner's desk. This current layout is one of the smaller ones I've built, so most of my rolling stock is still in boxes, but this is what I currently have sitting in the main station area right now. Do I have a cardboard train collection? Not really. I assume you're talking about those like promotional cardboard trains that get handed out at things. I've been given heaps of them over the years, and I find they always end up kind of falling to bits or getting really dusty or disgusting. I currently have the HCMT one sitting around somewhere, or is it an XT2 one? I can't remember. But yeah, I just find they don't really last, so I'm not particularly into them. Nespresso capsule or DIY coffee? I've actually got like a proper coffee machine that someone gave us randomly when they were moving house. So yeah, that's cool. What's a video game that's had an impact on me? This one, Crimson Skies from about 2003. Very fun old PC game. You're like a sky pirate. Really cool game. It's a bit hard to get it going on a modern PC. You have to kind of do a bunch of patches and things, but I have run it on Windows 11. It does work, and yeah, it's a good bit of fun. Do I think there are more doors or wheels in the world? My feeling is that historically it definitely would have been doors, and today it might be wheels. What is my opinion of the Byron Bay solar train? Look, I haven't actually been there, but I kind of have the general idea. I think it's basically, it's kind of like a fun little science experiment, I guess, and it's probably perfectly functional in that particular environment. It's like a very flat, short line. It's able to spend a lot of time charging. It's not actually serving like an important public transport use. It's definitely kind of cool. I think there is a risk of the idea of it being misappropriated as like a good way of electrifying trains. It's not actually a good way of electrifying trains. It's like, as I say, it's fine for that situation, but I'm always a little bit hesitant about these sorts of things which kind of tinker on the edges of trains being electric and potentially undermine the value of proper railway electrification in the mind of people who maybe don't have the full context. What time is it? Good question. It is 5:54 p.m. Do I think the Allen Main Line should be converted into light rail to reduce operating deficits? I know this is something that gets brought up quite a lot, but I would say that like that kind of approach of referring to its operating deficits and talking about maintenance costs and stuff. It's a very kind of like US approach to public transport of like, if it can't pay, it shouldn't exist. I think here in Australia, we rarely use that as like a primary reason for changing something. And I think it's always important to remember that it's a very different argument if you're building the line from scratch today compared to, we already have this, it already exists, is it worth just keeping it? And my opinion would be absolutely just keep it. Like, it's fine. It doesn't matter if it, like, no public transport really makes a profit. And I think the Alamein line is absolutely fine to keep as it is. EMD or Elco? Easy. What are my thoughts on Irish railways? I don't know a huge amount about them. I would be interested in visiting at some point, but I can say great distance they have between the rails there. What is better, sourdough or white bread? Definitely sourdough, and that's not just a COVID lockdown thing for me. I liked sourdough before it was cool. Why did they close the tram restaurant and can it come back? So most people answer for this that the restaurant trams didn't have like the magnetic track brakes, and that's why Yarra Trams didn't want them on the network. That's just kind of like a reason. The actual reason is that Yarra Trams doesn't want anyone else on the network. So you can sort of bring up technical reasons why the restaurant tram doesn't exist anymore, but the real reason is Yarra Trams didn't want them there, and that's kind of the end of the story, unfortunately. I did go on the restaurant tram once, and it was very nice. What's been my favourite opening day, first, last service? I was on the last VSET in the Blue Mountains earlier this year. Video to come, hopefully, if I get around to it. That was really cool. That was sort of surprisingly big energy, fun event. Would I like to see ferries become more of a viable form of transport in Victoria? Like, theoretically, yes, but I just don't think our geography particularly works for it. You could probably come up with a handful of places where ferries might work in Melbourne, but broadly speaking, it's just geographically doesn't make a lot of sense, especially with the Yarra being an extremely low-speed waterway. Will I do a collaboration with Shareth from Building Beautifully? Yeah, almost certainly. I do chat to Shareth a lot, and we've definitely talked about doing collaborations on a number of occasions, so I can tell you that we have definitely proceeded to the point of saying that would be a good idea. Where do you think the best fish and chips are in Melbourne? I do like that one in Altona that I showed in the Werribee video, largely because of its position. I haven't eaten there that often to definitely say that the fish and chips are great, but I do like the way you can kind of get off the train, walk down there, grab a fish and chips, and go sit on the beach. Very nice. Could you see the NSETs retiring anytime soon, given the state of the Swan Hill line? I'm not sure if the state of the Swan Hill line has anything to do with it, but yes, it's absolutely V-Line's like dream to get rid of the NSETs. Unfortunately, so enjoy them while you can. You live in Hobart. Thoughts on your woeful public transport system? I've only been to Hobart once, and I didn't use public transport while I was there. I was only there for like one day. It's very telling, I guess, that I didn't use it because I obviously like visiting other public transport systems. I think Hobart would do very well to have a tram system. I don't know much about their current bus system, but it's a very good candidate for a tram system, and obviously one of many, many places that historically did have trams. And also, you could probably run a sort of tram on the old heavy rail alignment and maybe extend that through the CBD, taking care to allow provision for the Tasmanian Transport Museum that runs on the alignment currently. But yeah, I think trams would be a great answer for Hobart. You are a Lilydale local, love the Comenge. Now Evie runs to Lilydale. It's a Comenge farewell tour on the old lines, likely before it's retired in the next few years. I mean, Evie or not, Comenges have always been allowed to run to Lilydale, Belgrave, anywhere on the Burnley and Clifton Hill groups. If it's sort of two separate questions, if a tour was to run, yes, it could absolutely run to those places. The odds of a tour running are probably very low, I would think, but I've been surprised by these things before. I think what's probably more likely in the current environment is like a publicly advertised last service, which is what kind of the opposite of the publicly advertised first service of the XT2, or the same thing happened with the VSETs in New South Wales. That was just a regular service, but it was advertised as the last one and kind of became a de facto tour. If that's the case, it's not going to be on the Burnley group, unfortunately. Thoughts on more standard gauge conversion in Victoria? Was it a mistake to start? I mean, yeah, it's a mess. The Murray Basin project is absurdly stupid now that they half did it. I would say fix that up. I'll do the remaining part of that. Beyond that, it starts to get really, really tricky, and I don't have great answers for it. How I like to pass the time while sitting on trains, music, books, scenery watching. If I'm on my own line, I will read or listen to music or maybe watch a video. Headphones on, always headphones on, people. But if I'm on any other line, I do try to just enjoy the scenery because that's a nice thing to do. I will ever post my photos to somewhere like Flickr or Instagram. Yeah, like I've sort of gone through patches in the past of uploading my still photos to places. It's not something I currently do. So the vast majority of my 85,000 rail photos are not visible anywhere publicly. At the moment, I just kind of don't have the time to put the effort into doing that on top of running the channel. Long term, I sort of have a few ideas about how I'd like to present my pictures publicly. It will definitely happen at some point, but yeah, right now I just kind of don't have the resources to have another sort of platform to maintain on my plate, I guess. What camera lenses do I use? I currently predominantly use a Canon 5D Mark IV and usually with a 24-70 on it. I also have a 16-35 and a 70-300L series, which I use for most of my telephoto stuff. But most of the video in my videos is on a GoPro 10. What public transport decision by the government has completely blindsided me? Definitely the SRL announcement, and by the sounds of things, it blindsided a lot of people, within the industry as well. I was quite surprised when that got announced. Am I the same person using the name Taitset that used to post as a teenager on Railpage forums around 15 plus years ago? Yes, that was me. If I could go back in time and change one thing in the entire history of Victoria, what would it be? Obviously, I could go for some big stuff here, but I'm just going to say the single tracking of the Bendigo line was pretty dumb. Should have absolutely stayed double track. What are your thoughts on the ongoing viability of the overland? I don't think my thoughts have changed enormously on it since I made the video a few years ago, but it's still kind of the same situation. It's kind of hanging in this weird in-between thing where there's obviously some demand for it, but they're not putting the work in to make the most of that. And it doesn't really make sense having it at this kind of half service that they currently run with it. I think they should put the effort in properly. I think there would be enough demand for that now. What is my favourite railway or tramway siding in Victoria, used or disused? Definitely the Echuca Wharf siding, which was very cool, and I did get to travel on once many years ago. What is the most random place I've been recognised, and how often does it actually happen? Obviously because I'm not visually in my videos, I don't get recognised that much, but it still happens like probably every couple of months, or sometimes by my voice or sometimes by context, or someone asks what I do and I start talking about it and they're like, oh, you're that guy. There's a funny one. When I was filming for the Lilydale line, I was on Glenferrie Road filming a Z-Class tram, and a guy just straight up walked up to me and pretty much asked if I was Taitset, just based on the fact that I was standing near a railway bridge holding a camera. And I asked if he wanted to be in the video. So if you have a look at this timestamp in the Lilydale video, you can see that guy. Hello to that guy. How do I feel about potential electrification of the line to Wyndham Vale? It should have been done from the start. It's absurd that they didn't do it when they built Tarnate Wyndham Vale, and they've dug themselves down pretty deep now on it being a diesel route, and it's kind of weird that they're talking about Melton electrification but still sort of ignoring Wyndham Vale. Absolutely essential. On a scale of 1 to 10, how sad will I be to see the commenters go? I will be 11 sad. Which suburb has the best coffee culture? It's obviously like most of inner Melbourne, but one particular good one I've been to a few times recently is Newmarket. Down on the street below Newmarket Station, there's a bunch of like nice cafes. It seems to have a really good sort of energy to it. Lots of others in that area too, Kensington and stuff, but yeah, really like that spot in Newmarket. With Melbourne finally joining the present day and rolling out contactless travel, will I switch over to contactless or keep using Mikey? I will absolutely keep using Mikey. I know people get really excited about being able to use contactless, and I understand that it's excellent for new users of the system or very occasional users of the system, partly because of how hard we made it to get Mikeys in the first place. But for me, I don't know, I just like having a ticket. I don't really see any particular value in having a different card that I pull out of my wallet for it and flashing around my debit card and handing it to people and having it out a lot more seems a bit silly, and also having all those transactions listed on my bank thing, whatever. I don't know. I just like having a ticket. I'm going to keep using Mikey. And And I love the fact that you have been waiting to sit down and watch the Lilydale line as a couple. That's very cool. Some of my favourite resources for learning about the railway industry. Also, there's like a few websites for Victorian stuff specifically. Have a look at VicSig. It's got a lot of like fleet lists and track diagrams and other historical information. Also, victorianrailways.net is absolutely excellent. Has a lot of historic track diagrams, pictures, other stuff. A lot of old documents and things. Get lost forever looking at that. One other little thing, the series of Comenge books by John Dunn are incredible for learning about all the best rolling stock built in Australia, all the Comenge rolling stock. They are really hard to find, these books. It took me ages to get the full set, and I spent quite a bit of money getting second-hand ones. But these are wonderful books, and you will learn a lot if you can find them. What do I think is one city in Australia that deserves a modern tram network? Geelong, definitely Geelong, no question about that. And as said previously, Hobart would be a good one. As a signalling nerd, I have to ask, what is the most curious, unusual signal, line-side sign, arrangement of signals that you know of on the Victorian network? Absolutely love this question, and I will say, if you have a favourite signal, line-side sign, arrangement of signals that you know of, chuck it down below. But one that I always find kind of cool is at the up end of Laverton, there's this entire line of different signals, which from left to right is on the west line. You've got a signal there with a theatre style route indicator, which also has a coacting signal. Then you've got the east line, you've got the same thing, the signal with the route indicator with the coactor. Both of those are also signals that can show 65 medium speed, I assume. You can see the little light for the speed there. And then you've got a signal for departing from platform 3 towards the Altona line, and that signal has a coacting signal which is way over here in the car park, and then you've got a signal for arriving into platform 3 as well, which also has a coactor which is on the same post as that departure signal. So that's a fun little layout there. I mentioned a while ago that the Hurstbridge line could have been extended all the way to King Lake. How would that work considering the steep and hilly gradient? Yeah, I'm actually not sure if it's possible. I'm also not actually sure if that was surveyed or an official thing. There was definitely a survey done from Eltham to Christmas Hills. In terms of Hurstbridge to King Lake, it's something that kind of like seems obvious. I have no idea if that was actually proposed or not. I imagine it would be possible as a narrow gauge line, definitely. Probably a very windy one. I don't know if it would be possible with broad gauge, probably not, or at least not even slightly easily. So yeah, there's a good reason it never happened, but probably would have been very scenic. How old was I when I took a train trip just for its own sake? About 10, I reckon. Going out with a friend and just riding some trains and trams. And then by the time I was like maybe 12, I was taking the train by myself, going places. So yeah, pretty early on. What are my thoughts on the rejected bus plan along with the individuals advocating for better public transport across Melbourne? Yep, super important, obviously. Yeah, as I've mentioned before, improving our buses is one of the biggest things that we could do relatively easily that we tend not to do. But there has been some really good advocacy out there and actually some pretty good progress on that in recent years. What's my favourite colour and why? As someone with young kids, I do have to have a favourite colour, and it's dark blue. Will I do any more videos on Australian cities' suburban fleet history like the one I did for Adelaide and Melbourne? Yes, I would like to. It's a pretty long-term plan. They're pretty involved making those videos. Sydney would be by far the most likely one I would do, but I'm not planning on doing it anytime soon. What is my favourite steam rail engine? Look, they're all lovely, but quite like the sort of the history of R711, the way it ran in service in the 90s and 2000s. How do I think expanding the daily fare cap to include regional services has gone in Victoria? I mean, it seems to have been enormously successful. I think it's broadly a good thing, and it's definitely made commuting from a lot of those sort of interurban distance places a lot more cost effective for people. How hard is it to unconvert a rail trail back to rail? Physically, extremely easy. Politically, almost completely impossible. Would I make a video about Melbourne's bus fleet and its history? No, not necessarily because I think it would be bad, but just because I don't really know anything about it at all. I tend to really only make videos about things that I already know a bit about. I don't really do like research from scratch type videos. So yeah, definitely not anytime soon because I just don't have the base knowledge to do it. Do I have a favorite locomotive, and if so, why isn't it a W class? Well, my favorite locomotive is actually 2 W classes next to each other. So yeah, will you see a video of me cycling the Warburton Trail as I did with the Inner Circle and Diamond Creek Trails? It's extremely unlikely just because Warburton is quite long. I don't currently have the fitness to easily do that. I have just been kind of getting back into cycling and trying to build that up again a bit, but riding over that sort of distance on a dirt trail is probably a bit beyond me at the moment. I also think the sort of ratio of interesting things on that line compared to its length is significantly lower than those other ones I've done. So yeah, not a high priority, but maybe at some point. Are there any plans to do videos internationally this year? It's pretty unlikely. I think I have sort of vague ideas that I might make one international trip this year, but that's far from confirmed at this point. Can't wait for the 85,139 Q&A sub, and that is absolutely correct. That will be the next one. What is my favourite character from Thomas the Tank? I actually wasn't a big Thomas person as a kid. I did have the books. I've got this big complete collection book that I've had since I was a kid. The ones that I kind of do stick with me, there was sort of a time where some of the illustrations in Thomas were a lot more dramatic. Like there was a lot more drawings in storms or like bad weather or like kind of a bit more dramatic. I kind of really liked those, and I remember being quite interested in there's a couple of stories based around the real life Mount Snowdon rack railway, and I remember being quite interested in that. And it's set in a fictional location, but it's completely Mount Snowdon. Like all the views are basically real locations of Mount Snowdon. And that probably did contribute to me going to Mount Snowdon in real life in 2017. So yeah, but yeah, overall wasn't a big Thomas person. Will I do suburban line videos for every city on Earth? Yeah, yes. Will your next milestone video be for 86,564 subscribers, the most well-known number after 62,852? Yep, that's absolutely correct. It's really good that so many people have worked out my process for this. Who inspired me to make videos in the first place, and who do I reference when making videos? It's actually maybe a surprisingly hard question. I don't think I've sort of been directly inspired by many other railed YouTubers. I think I definitely watched, at the sort of the time that I started making these informational videos, I definitely watched some Jeff Marshall videos already and sort of admired his sort of passion for it, I guess, but I don't think that's really the type of videos that I make. I also definitely had watched some Race Martin transit videos and sort of liked that more kind of informational thing, but also a bit different to what I wanted to do. But I think it was more that I'd been sort of writing some articles for magazines and been into that sort of more traditional railfan media, I guess, and had found the experience of doing that kind of a bit frustrating and wanting to find a format that I could have complete control over what I wanted to do and use entirely my own graphics and that sort of thing. And that could have potentially become like a blog or something. And I think I just ended up mucking around with making videos because I had that sort of media experience already. And that's what happened, I suppose. Fantastic, great move. Well done, Martin. Brilliant reference there. Thank you very much. Have I spotted anyone in the wild watching my videos? I haven't. It would be very funny if that happened. I have encountered people in the wild talking about my videos, but yes, it would be a very funny moment indeed if I actually see someone watching one, and I will absolutely be hanging out for that to happen one day. So a very random question here. Do you like lamb and cheese sandwiches? I'm not going to read that full explanation of the context there, but please do pause that if you'd like the full context for this question. I can't say I've deeply thought about lamb and cheese sandwiches, but I think I'd probably like one. Yeah, that sounds great. An open TTD question, what's my favourite vehicle graphics? I really like the Japanese set because it's got heaps of EMUs and electric locomotives. I did also play around with the Switzerland set for a while. That was also great. But yeah, on my main map, I've got the Japanese set. How has YouTube changed since I started? Is it better or worse now? I mean, it has obviously changed a lot. I've been here almost since the start. I actually signed up to YouTube 1 year after it started. It's obviously evolved from something that was basically just a video hosting platform to a sort of self-sustaining ecosystem. I'd say broadly the changes have been good. I mean, they've created one of the only places on the internet where you can really make a standalone living by being a creator. Obviously, they've shot themselves in the foot a bit by not really providing for certain aspects of that very well, and that's why Patreon has flourished in a big way. But I think the YouTube algorithm actually works really well, despite many people complaining about it. I think it does a good job of sort of showing people broadly what they want to see. And I'd say the things that have got worse is the sort of reasonably recent shifts towards heavily pushing short form content and kind of going against the things that have made YouTube unique. You know, YouTube has done well by supporting long form content, and I don't think it's a good path for them to push short form heavily. And like every other big tech platform in the last couple of years, they've also been pushing a bunch of really stupid AI stuff, particularly, I mean, both allowing sort of AI slop channels, but also a bunch of like really annoying AI features and stuff in the back end, which I just find really frustrating. But I think that's something we're just going to have to deal with for the moment. But broadly speaking, I think just about every YouTuber has this perspective. We broadly like it here. They are pretty annoying at times, but overall, I think it's a perfectly good platform, really. I get sick if I'm sitting backwards on the train. Does that happen to you? No, I actually never get sick on trains, or trams for that matter, but I do get sick on most other forms of transport. I get really badly seasick, and I actually get sick pretty much every time I go on a bus. Not like terribly, but I just generally feel awful if I'm ever on a bus for more than about 10 minutes. But yes, never on a train. Are you bald? Yes, I am. Why do you think that VSETs are as awesome as I do? It's just because they're really awesome. Like, they're just the most awesome train. I might make a video elaborating on that fairly soon. If you could electrify the Stony Point line, but for every station you electrified, you lost 1 year of your life, how many stations would you electrify? So I'm going to assume that in this universe where I can do this, it also works the other way, and if I start de-electrifying the Frankston line, I start gaining years of my life. So what I would do is do that, run the Frankston line with like push-pull H sets or something, you know, something interesting, diesel, and then I would live to like 120 or 130 and have plenty of time to enjoy the unusual spectacle. The most underrated heritage tram or train in Victoria, probably the Ballarat Tram Museum. Absolutely excellent heritage-focused museum with some beautifully restored rolling stock. The museum itself is great, and the run out along Wendouree Parade is great as well. So yeah, if you haven't been there, go to the Ballarat Tram Museum. How do I think the fare structure at Melbourne's public transport can improve for all users? I basically have the same opinion on this as the Public Transport Users Association, which is that there should be an automatic weekly cap. We shouldn't have those like passes that you load on. It should just be if you reach a certain amount a week, it's capped. And there should be like a much cheaper short trip fare. These would be extremely easy things to implement. They're not infrastructure heavy things. They're just, for some reason, they just haven't decided to do it. Should the XPT stop at Sunshine instead of Broadmeadows, assuming a platform was built there as part of the Sunshine Station Super Hub? I don't know about instead of, I think probably as well as. I think it would probably be fine for it to stop at both. Sydney and Melbourne are two very similarly sized cities, yet Sydney blows Melbourne's public transport out of the water. This extends to all sorts of stuff, assuming I agree with the premise of my question, which, I'm sad to say, but I do. Why do I think this is the case? It's basically just deep historical, cultural things. I don't think there's any easy answer to it. Sydney's done a much better job of keeping the network in public hands, keeping a high level of staffing and sort of maintaining experience over the years. I think Melbourne has, lost a lot of crucial experience to running a good network, and we've also sort of destroyed our attitude of the importance of public transport. And there's no easy answer, but I suspect if a bunch of people involved in running Melbourne's network could go and spend a month just watching how things are done in Sydney, that would probably be great for all of us. How do we go about defeating the car lobby given it has so much power in Australia? Obviously another huge question that is very hard to answer quickly, but I do think the main thing is education, because surprisingly for such an obvious problem, it is a problem that the majority of people do not understand. I think most adults my age and older don't really understand that it's possible to have a really good functioning city without car dependency, and I think they don't really understand how much it affects urban land use and a lot of things that are just nice about the way we live in our cities. So I think education is the key part. I hope that I'm doing a little bit of it. Not that this is primarily an urbanist channel, but I do like to drop a few things in here and there. Yeah, it's all we can do really. And we are so much further ahead on this than previous generations. I mean, I don't think I was ever taught about sort of car dependency being a problem, or urbanism or urban design or anything like that in any sort of formal way, or, you know, by people I knew. So in a way, we've got a lot of catching up to do. There's been entire generations that have just not really understood these concepts. And we now kind of have an opportunity with a lot of young people coming through now who do have a lot of resources, many of them here on YouTube, to discover how much better our cities can be without car dependency, and how much better our lives can be without car dependency. What do I think of the proposed reopening of the Somerton link between the Upfield and Craigieburn lines? Yep, I think that would definitely be good, and I think for all the obvious reasons, but I also think a less talked about benefit of that would be providing a potential alternative route for Seymour and Shepparton line trains. If V-Line did the right thing and actually trained their drivers over the alternative route, which they wouldn't because they don't like flexibility anymore, unfortunately. But in a hypothetical world where they did do that, it would be great to have that extra flexibility. Why haven't we seen Will James from Will James Railways and Taitset in the same room together? So it's not so much that we're never in the same room together, it's more that it's the seeing part. I sort of have a rare condition where I don't appear visibly in the spectrum of light that humans can see. So I'm actually, I'm in lots of Will's videos. I'm also in all of my videos right there in front of the camera, but it's just to do with this condition. You just can't see me. I just don't show up on cameras or to the human eye. So yeah, that's maybe a surprising fact you didn't know about me. Do I have a dog spike collection from my wide range of rally adventures? You know, I used to have a bunch of dog spikes and I feel like I've lost them at one of my house moves because I haven't seen them for a while. I've got one or two maybe still, but yeah, I need to dig those out. They might be somewhere. Favorite sport? I'm not really a sport guy. I kind of think I touched on that before. I do periodically get interested in, I like the Winter Olympics, and also kind of a little bit the normal Olympics. I used to play a bit of soccer when I was younger, and I do quite enjoy doing that in the rare cases that I do sometimes kick a ball around with my kids or whatever. But I'm one of those soccer fans that completely forgets about it until the World Cup, then watches like 3 games that are like a good time of day, and then I forget about it for another 4 years. We're nearly there, folks. I'm on my last line of questions. How much of my audience is actually from Australia, seeing as the algorithm decided that you, an American, would be interested in your channel. So on my long form videos, which is what I would consider the channel to basically be, it's about 80% from Australia. And then after that, it's like 4% from the US, 4% from the UK, then New Zealand and Germany sometimes hop up to about 1%, and every other country is below 1%. So New Zealand punching well above its weight population-wise there, but yeah, the majority is Australians, and if you include shorts, which I generally don't because I just don't think they're very important, then it drops down to more like 60% Australians. But yeah, so broadly speaking, the majority is, but there are quite a few of you from the US and the UK. How do I feel about the Bankstown line being converted into a metro, and do I think the conversions for the metros are a bad idea? I think the way they're doing it, where they've closed the Bankstown line for, what is it, over a year now, close to 2 years, is unacceptable. It's just, I think I've made my view on this pretty clear in the past. You can't do that. It's really, really not okay. They absolutely should have built the southern part of the metro into like a new area that wasn't served or something like that, and come up with some other solution for freeing up space in the city circle, maybe directing the Bankstown line to another extension, heavy rail extension somewhere else to the north. I don't know, there's lots of other things. I just think if you're going to do these things, don't close the line for 2 years. That's very, very silly. What's my favourite freight-only railway line? I quite like the Sea Lake former Cullowan line, as mentioned earlier in the video, the Witchy Proof. Lovely Mallee branch line. Why are Mummy and Daddy fighting? In your opinion, what's the best heritage line in Victoria to ride? I think it's hard to go past. Look, I think Puffing Billy is great. I think it's unquestionably probably the most scenic and kind of fully formed tourist railway, I guess, with, you know, everything looks immaculate, all that stuff, but it's also incredibly touristy. And I think doesn't quite have that charming branch line feel that it once had when I used to go there as a kid. I think for a much more sort of authentic branch line feel now, the Victorian Goldfields Railway is probably the place to go. It's between Melbourne and Castlemaine. It's a lovely trip. I do think all the tourist railways are worth visiting. Queenscliff is fantastic. The Bellarine Railway, Mornington's fantastic. They're all worth visiting. All right, that is finally it. Thank you everyone for sitting through that very large number of questions. As previously mentioned, the next Q&A will be at 97,442 subscribers, based on the well-known formula that I'm using to calculate these things. I don't know if I'll be able to do this format again as the channel grows, because it's obviously already pushing the limit of how many questions I can answer. I might try something a little bit different next time. But a huge thanks to my patrons on Patreon who, as I've mentioned a couple of times already in this video, they are the reason why I've been able to do this channel as a going concern and not have to give it up in favor of getting a job again. So thank you so much for your support, everybody on Patreon. If you would like to join them, you can sign up for as little as $2 a month. You will get to see all the videos early. You'll get your name in the credits. You get to see some behind the scenes content and find out what I'm working on, including what's next in the Long Line series. So thank you very much to all those people. And if you would like to continue watching out to East Pakenham, please stick around. There's about another 15 minutes until we get there. But otherwise, I'm going to stop talking now, and thank you very much for watching.
Now arriving at Berwick. The next station is Beaconsfield. Now arriving at Beaconsfield. The next station is Officer. Officer. The next station is Cardinia Road. arriving at Cardinia Road. Cardinia Road.
20th of the 6th. Yeah. Sure, yeah.
对啊。
How long before 4 months, is it, or? Yep. She will be back. Yeah. Yeah, a bit longer, yeah.
The next station is Pakenham.
Appreciate it, thank you, Doctor. You have a good day. Yeah, appreciate it, thank you.
What's the place? Sorry?
Now arriving at Pakenham. The next station is East Pakenham. Now arriving at East Pakenham. This train will be terminating at East Pakenham. East Pakenham. This train will be terminating at East Pakenham.